Listen up, you pathetic, sickly little charity case. The divorce papers are filed. This house, everything in it, and the luxury car are all mine. When this is over, I'm marrying my girlfriend. My husband screamed at me, announced our divorce, and threw me out while I was gravely ill. He took everything, thinking he had won. With what little strength she had left, Catherine picked up the envelope. Her trembling fingers struggled to break the seal. She pulled out several sheets of paper. At the top of the first page, she read the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Catherine lay in the enormous bed, which felt cold against her skin, but her entire body was burning like a furnace. The delicate nightgown she usually wore around the house was soaked through with sweat that beaded on her temples. Her throat was raw and achy. Every breath was a painful effort. For 2 days, she had been confined to this bed, utterly helpless. "Honey, what did I do wrong?" Catherine tried to say, but tears were already welling in her eyes. Catherine tried to reach for the glass of water on the nightstand, but her hands were trembling violently. The glass slipped from her grasp and tumbled onto the thick plush carpet, spilling the little water that remained. With nothing left to do, Catherine closed her eyes, trying to endure her despair. Blake had changed over the past year. Ever since her husband had been promoted to department head at his company, his attitude had become insufferably arrogant. He often came home late and would find any excuse to blame Catherine for something, anything. The breaking point had come 3 months ago, when Catherine started coughing frequently and becoming easily exhausted. Blake never showed a shred of compassion. Instead, he started calling her his sickly wife. He seemed to have forgotten that Catherine was the woman who had stood by him when they had nothing, living together in a tiny, rented apartment. Ever since her husband had been promoted to department head at his company, his attitude had become insufferably arrogant. He often came home late and would find any excuse to blame Catherine for something, anything. The breaking point had come 3 months ago, when Catherine started coughing frequently and becoming easily exhausted. Blake never showed a shred of compassion. Instead, he started calling her his sickly wife. Catherine tried to reach for the glass of water on the nightstand, but her hands were trembling violently. The glass slipped from her grasp and tumbled onto the thick plush carpet, spilling the little water that remained. With nothing left to do, Catherine closed her eyes, trying to endure her despair. Blake had changed over the past year. There was no pharmacy bag in his hands. Instead, he carried a thick manila envelope. "Blake," Catherine's voice was hoarse and weak. "My medicine. My head is killing me, honey. I have a fever." Blake laughed. It was a harsh, jarring sound that pained her ears. "Medicine? I've brought something much better than medicine. This is a cure for both of us. A cure for my life," Blake said. He strode over and tossed the manila envelope onto the blanket covering Catherine's legs. Catherine flinched, staring at the envelope in confusion. "What is this, honey?" "Open it, unless you want to die of curiosity," Blake retorted, his tone cold and sharp. With what little strength she had left, Catherine picked up the envelope. Her trembling fingers struggled to break the seal. She pulled out several sheets of paper. At the top of the first page, she read the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." Catherine's world seemed to stop. The air left her lungs, the burning fever vanished, replaced by a chilling cold that seeped deep into her bones. She looked up at Blake, searching her husband's eyes for even a flicker of doubt, but all she found was smug satisfaction. "Divorce?" Catherine whispered in disbelief. "Why are you surprised?" Blake sneered. He sat on the edge of the bed, but kept his distance as if Catherine disgusted him. "Listen, you sick, pathetic woman. Did you really think I wanted to spend the rest of my life taking care of a useless invalid like you? I've arranged everything. The divorce papers are filed." Blake stood up again, pacing the room as if giving a victory speech. "I'm sick of it, sick of hearing you cough every day, sick of seeing you lying in bed with no energy. You're a burden, a dead weight in my life." "Honey, what did I do wrong?" Catherine tried to say, but tears were already welling in her eyes. Blake stood up again, pacing the room as if giving a victory speech. "I'm sick of it, sick of hearing you cough every day, sick of seeing you lying in bed with no energy. You're a burden, a dead weight in my life." Catherine said nothing. There was something behind her gaze that Blake couldn't read. He mistook her silence for defeat. Are you listening to me? You're not getting a single dime. Division of assets? Don't even dream of it. You brought nothing into this house, and you'll take nothing when you leave. Then, Blake delivered the words that shattered what was left of Catherine's heart. When this is over, he said, his face lighting up, I'm going to marry my girlfriend Amber. She's so much healthier, so much more beautiful, and most importantly, she understands my position as a successful man. Unlike you. Catherine closed her eyes. So, there was another woman. The name was unfamiliar, but the pain was agonizingly real. I don't want to see your face in this house tomorrow morning, Blake added cruelly. I'm giving you until dawn. Get out of this house. Don't take anything but the clothes on your sick body. Blake glanced at Catherine, who was now crying silently, hot tears streaming down her pale cheeks. Crying won't change a thing. The papers are already filed. The process will be quick. Blake turned and straightened his shirt. I'm going to sleep at Amber's loft tonight. I don't want to be under the same roof as you. I'll send someone tomorrow morning to make sure you're gone. Catherine wanted to scream, to curse him, but all her strength was gone. She could only watch her husband's back disappear through the door. The bedroom door slammed shut. Then came the slam of the front door. A moment later, the roar of Blake's car engine faded as he left the property. Catherine was alone, gravely ill, divorced, and evicted. She wept uncontrollably. The pain in her heart was far worse than the fever scorching her body. She cried for her shattered marriage, for the cruel betrayal. After 15 minutes, the tears stopped. She gasped for air, wiping her eyes brusquely. In the midst of the pain, something else emerged, something cold, hard, and calculating. Her face, once pale with sickness, now hardened. Catherine wanted to scream, to curse him, but all her strength was gone. She could only watch her husband's back disappear through the door. The bedroom door slammed shut. Then came the slam of the front door. A moment later, the roar of Blake's car engine faded as he left the property. Catherine was alone, gravely ill, divorced, and evicted. She wept uncontrollably. The pain in her heart was far worse than the fever scorching her body. She cried for her shattered marriage, for the cruel betrayal. The call connected on the first ring. A calm, professional woman's voice came through. Good evening, Mrs. Miller. You're calling at this hour. Are you all right? I was told you weren't feeling well. Catherine took a deep breath, trying to steady her trembling voice. Director Hayes, she said, her voice still hoarse, but now laced with ice. Contingency plan. Activate it. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then Director Hayes's voice turned serious. Understood, ma'am. What's happened? I've been thrown out, Catherine said. Blake divorced me. He thinks I'm a pathetic, useless, sickly woman. My God, the nerve of that man, Director Hayes hissed. Director, I'm very sick. My fever is dangerously high. I need a medical evacuation. I don't want to go to a regular hospital. Come to the house and get me. Bring the private medical team from the Sterling Clinic. No sirens. Do it quietly. I don't want anyone to know. Understood, ma'am. The VVIP medical team will be there in 30 minutes. I'll come and get you myself. Can you hold on? Catherine looked down at the divorce papers on the blanket. With the last of her strength, she crumpled the papers in her fist. I have to hold on, Director. The game has just begun. She ended the call. Her body still shook from the fever, but her eyes now gleamed with a sharp intensity in the darkness of the room. Blake had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had just thrown out his wife. He didn't know he had just thrown out the owner of Catherine Holdings, a global corporation with a monthly net profit of $1.6 million. Catherine waited in suffocating silence. Each tick of the clock sounded like a hammer blow. She clutched her secret phone tightly. Her mind raced. She feared Blake might suddenly return. She feared the medical team would be delayed. Her body alternated between shivering chills and searing heat. Exactly 25 minutes later, her phone vibrated silently. It was a text from Director Hayes. We've arrived. The door is unlocked. The team is entering. Catherine let out a breath of relief. She had guessed Blake wouldn't bother locking the door. The man was too arrogant to think his near-death wife could do anything. With her remaining strength, Catherine pushed the blanket aside. Her feet touched the cold floor. Her head spun violently. She nearly fell but gripped the bedpost to steady herself. She had to leave. With trembling hands, she grabbed a long coat hanging behind the door and put it on. She wouldn't leave this house looking undignified. She wouldn't let Blake take her dignity. The bedroom door opened silently. Catherine startled, but then she saw two people in dark, unassuming uniforms. They weren't the stark white of paramedics. They moved quickly and quietly. Behind them appeared Director Hayes, a woman in her late 50s with a firm but kind face, dressed impeccably in a business suit. Her expression was one of deep concern as she saw Catherine's condition. "Mrs. Miller," Director Hayes whispered. "I'm ready, Director," Catherine replied weakly. "Get Mrs. Miller on the portable stretcher," Director Hayes ordered the medical team. They immediately unfolded a collapsible gurney and gently helped Catherine lie down. "Ma'am, we're going to administer a temporary fever reducer to make you more comfortable during transport," one of the medics said. Catherine just nodded. She felt a slight prick in her arm, and soon a cooling sensation spread through her. As they lifted her, Catherine took one last look at the bedroom ceiling, the room she had decorated herself, the room that had been a silent witness to Blake's changing attitude. They carried her out of the room and through the luxurious living room. Catherine's gaze fell on the large wedding photo hanging on the wall, a picture of her and Blake, smiling happily. The Blake from the past, the one who was gentle and loving. Now that photo seemed like a mockery. "Leave everything. Don't take anything," Catherine whispered. "Of course, ma'am. We don't need anything from here," Director Hayes replied firmly. They went out the front door. There was no flashy ambulance in the driveway. Instead, a black, unmarked Mercedes-Benz Sprinter van was parked, looking more like a presidential escort vehicle. The side door slid open, revealing an interior that was a fully equipped VVIP emergency medical space. Meanwhile, in a lavish loft downtown, Blake was laughing loudly. He poured a drink for Amber, a beautiful young woman in a sheer nightgown. "So, tomorrow we're the official owners of that big house, baby?" Amber asked flirtatiously. "Of course," I threw her out. "That sickly woman won't dare to fight back. She has nothing. Tomorrow, I'll have all the locks changed, and the day after, we can start remodeling the bedroom," Blake said, pulling Amber into an embrace. "So exciting. Finally, all of this will be ours," Amber exclaimed. Blake raised his glass. "To our new life," he toasted. His old cell phone lay on the table, switched to silent. He didn't want to be disturbed by any calls from that sickly woman. Inside the medical vehicle gliding smoothly through the night, Catherine's condition was being managed. A doctor waiting inside immediately started an IV line. "Temperature is 105.4. It's a severe infection, but we're on it. We need to get her to the clinic for intensive care," the doctor said. Director Hayes sat in a chair beside Catherine's bed, watching her pale face with a worried expression. "Ma'am, you have to be strong. We've prepared everything at the Sterling Clinic." Catherine closed her eyes. The fever reducer was beginning to work, lessening the dizziness. Her thoughts drifted to the past. 5 years ago, at the beginning of this whole secret, Blake had just been laid off from his first job. He was depressed for months. Catherine, who was just a housewife then, tried to comfort him. Blake became sensitive about money. He forbade Catherine from working, a matter of pride. "Your job is to be at home. I'll make the money," he'd say, despite being unemployed. But Catherine, who secretly held a degree in pharmacology, was frustrated. She had ideas. In her spare time between chores, she began experimenting in the kitchen, not cooking, but formulating skincare products with organic herbal ingredients, remembering old recipes passed down from her grandmother. She used all her personal savings to buy high-quality raw materials. After months of testing, she created a facial serum and a brightening cream with astonishing effects. She tried them on herself, and the results were incredible. Blake, busy with his job search, paid no attention. All he knew was that his wife was playing around in the kitchen. Catherine built up her courage. She opened a small online store. At first, she only sold to acquaintances, but word of mouth spread like wildfire. Orders surged. It was around this time that Blake found a new job. His salary was decent. he started to become arrogant. He would often see Catherine busy late at night on her old phone, responding to customer orders. "I give you money, and you're still glued to that phone. It's like you have nothing better to do," Blake had yelled one night. Catherine had simply stayed silent. She had just closed a sale worth $32,500 that night. The turning point was when she met director Diane Hayes at a women's entrepreneurship seminar. Catherine attended as a participant. Director Hayes was the guest speaker, a former senior executive of a multinational corporation who had taken early retirement. Catherine worked up the nerve to approach Director Hayes after the event, showing her the products and a handwritten business proposal. Director Hayes was astounded by Catherine's potential. "This product is exceptional, Miss Miller, and your business strategy is rock solid," she had said. To make a long story short, Director Hayes agreed to join, not as an investor but as a partner. She wanted to get back in the game and saw Catherine's vision. They founded Catherine Holdings, or CH. Catherine was the owner and the brain behind all the products. Director Hayes was the CEO, the public face of the company. Catherine had one condition: her name was to appear nowhere. She wanted to remain Blake's ordinary wife. Ironically, she hoped that with Director Hayes' network helping Blake succeed at his new company, he would become a better husband. But Catherine was wrong. The more successful Blake became, the more arrogant he grew. CH, on the other hand, grew exponentially. From skincare, they expanded into luxury fashion. High-end apparel and accessories designed by Catherine became wildly popular in national and international markets: New York, Paris, Shanghai, even Tokyo. A monthly net profit of $1.6 million was a conservative figure for Catherine's personal take-home pay, separate from the company's revenue, which was tens of times larger. Catherine kept all this wealth well hidden. She continued to live simply. Even when Blake wanted to buy the luxury house and the sports car, he had to take out a large bank loan. Blake bragged that he secured the loan because of his excellent job performance. He had no idea that his business loan, which was on the verge of default a year ago, had been secretly bought out in its entirety by an investment firm, a subsidiary of CH. The luxury house and sports car he was so proud of were the collateral for that loan. Legally, they no longer belonged to the bank, but to CH, that is, to Catherine. Catherine opened her eyes. The medical vehicle was now entering the VVIP area of the clinic. "Director," Catherine called out. Her voice was still weak, but her gaze was as sharp as steel. "Yes, Mrs. Miller?" Director Hayes leaned in. Blake took the house and the car. He said they were all his, in his name. Director Hayes smiled faintly, a knowing smile. "He forgot, ma'am. Who paid off his business loan from First National Commerce Bank a year ago? When he was about to declare bankruptcy, he forgot," Catherine continued, "that the collateral for that loan was the very house and luxury car he brags about every day. And he certainly doesn't know," Director Hayes added, "that the investment firm that bought his entire debt from the bank is Catherine Holdings." There was a moment of silence. The doctor and paramedic in the vehicle professionally pretended not to have heard the secret conversation. "Director Hayes," Catherine said, "initiate the asset recovery procedure." "When shall I start, ma'am?" There was a moment of silence. The doctor and paramedic in the vehicle professionally pretended not to have heard the secret conversation. Director Hayes nodded. 3 days. Consider it the last free rent he's offering us. After 3 days, our legal team will move. On the 3rd day exactly, we will take back everything that is rightfully yours, ma'am." "Good." Catherine closed her eyes again. "Now, focus on getting me healthy. I need to be well enough to see the look on his shattered face." The medical vehicle stopped in a private lobby. A team of specialists was already waiting. Catherine was transferred to a presidential treatment suite. Far away, Blake slept soundly in Amber's arms, dreaming of his beautiful new life, completely unaware that his real life was set to end in 3 days. The victory was too sweet for Blake. He woke up in Amber's luxurious loft. Morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the room in golden light. Amber was still asleep beside him, clutching his arm tightly. Blake looked at her beautiful face and smiled with satisfaction. He had done it. He had gotten rid of the burden in his life, that sickly woman, Catherine. He imagined Catherine was probably at a bus station right now, crying, trying to get back to her parents' poor house. Blake chuckled. Not his problem anymore. His bright, new life began today. "Good morning, honey," Amber's husky, flirtatious voice purred. She opened her eyes. "What time is it? Is that woman gone from our house yet?" "I'm sure she is," he replied confidently. "I told her to be out before dawn. She has no choice, no money, no power, just a weak woman who lived off me." Amber beamed. She got out of bed, her silk nightgown slipping off her shoulder. "Great! I can't wait to move in. This loft is nice, but that house is a palace, and I'll be the queen." "Of course, honey. Anything for you," Blake said. "Come on, get ready. We'll have breakfast in our new home. I'll tell the housekeeper who comes regularly to throw away anything Catherine left behind. I don't want a single trace of her." An hour later, Blake's luxury sports car pulled smoothly into the driveway of the grand house. Blake got out, wearing sunglasses like a king. Amber walked arrogantly on his arm. Blake opened the front door. "Welcome to our palace, my queen," he announced. They stepped inside. It was strange. The house was very quiet, but also very clean. Too clean. Blake had expected Catherine to leave a mess, throwing things around in a fit of tears, but that wasn't the case. He walked to the bedroom and opened the door, his heart beating a little faster. He found the room incredibly tidy. The bed where Catherine had been lying in pain was now perfectly made with crisp, white sheets and pillowcases. There was no sign of medicine or the broken water glass. Even the carpet by the bed where Catherine had dropped the glass looked dry and perfectly clean. "She must have cleaned up," Blake muttered, bewildered. "Good thing she behaved," Amber replied from behind him. At least she was useful one last time. Blake felt a little uneasy. It was odd. How could Catherine with a high fever have made this room so immaculate? And where were the dirty sheets? He checked the closet. Catherine's modest clothes, her simple dresses and scarves were gone. The dresser drawers were also empty. "She's really gone," Blake said, finally feeling relieved. He shook off his unease. Maybe she had called a cab and taken a small suitcase. Better this way. A clean break. "Of course it's clean. Now let's measure this room," Amber exclaimed excitedly. "I want to change this bed. It's too old-fashioned. I want a round bed with a canopy. And these walls need to be repainted. I want gold." Amber ran around the house, her shrill voice breaking the silence, pointing at the furniture. "This sofa is ugly. Change it. This painting is tacky. Throw it out. This kitchen needs a complete remodel. I want an imported Italian kitchen set." Blake just smiled. "Yes, honey, I'll change everything. Anything for you. Tonight, we'll celebrate. I'll invite our closest friends. I'll order the most luxurious catering in the city." Blake took out his phone and called his usual premium catering service. He ordered the most expensive items on the menu, imported Wagyu beef, fresh seafood platters, and premium European wines. "Understood, Mr. Williams. The total for your order is $2,200. As per procedure, we require a 50% deposit now," the catering agent said over the phone. "Of course. Send me the link. I'll pay with my primary credit card," Blake said arrogantly. He sat on the sofa Amber hated and opened his banking app. He tried to pay the $1,100 deposit, entered his credit card number, and hit pay. The phone processed for a moment. Then a red notification popped up. "Transaction denied." "Understood, Mr. Williams. The total for your order is $2,200. As per procedure, we require a 50% deposit now," the catering agent said over the phone. "Honey, what's taking so long?" Amber called out, busy taking selfies in the living room. "Just a moment, sweetie. I think the bank's having a network problem," Blake said, trying to sound calm. He was starting to feel embarrassed. He tried another credit card from the same bank. Declined. A cold sweat began to form on his brow. This couldn't be happening. He was a VIP client. Why were his cards being declined? He tried his debit card. Declined. Insufficient funds. Blake's eyes widened. Insufficient funds? Impossible. His salary had been deposited just 3 days ago. He quickly closed the payment app and opened his main mobile banking app. His heart was pounding. He entered his password, the screen loaded, And then a message appeared. Access locked. Please contact your nearest branch. Blake's body went rigid. Panic started to creep into his chest. This was a disaster. He couldn't access his salary account. He couldn't use his credit cards. Blake, the caterer just called me. They said the payment is still being declined. How embarrassing. Amber whined, her face now scrunched in a pout. Calm down, honey. Calm down. Blake was panicking. He remembered he still had an emergency account at another bank, one he rarely used and wasn't linked to any credit facilities. The balance wasn't much, but there were probably a few $1,000s left. With trembling hands, he tried to pay the deposit from that account. Success. Blake sighed in relief. He had saved face in front of Amber. For now. See? It was a network issue, he said with a forced smile. It's all sorted. The catering will arrive at 7 p.m. Amber brightened up again. Great, now I have to get ready for my salon appointment. After Amber left, Blake's smile vanished instantly. His face was pale. Something was very, very wrong. Why was his main account locked? Did it have something to do with Catherine? Impossible. That stupid woman couldn't do something like this. He vowed to call the bank first thing tomorrow morning and give them a piece of his mind. He would demand compensation for this humiliation. As he paced the room, suppressing his anxiety, the doorbell rang. Blake opened the door. A uniformed courier stood before him, holding a large manila envelope. Mr. Blake Williams? Yes, that's me. Certified mail. Please sign here. Blake signed for it, closed the door, and examined the envelope. The sender was a very expensive-sounding law firm, Grant and Sterling Associates. Blake assumed it must be the court approval documents related to his divorce petition. He tore it open eagerly, but the contents weren't from family court. It was a formal notice of default, a legal warning. His eyes scanned the harsh, formal sentences. Dear Mr. Williams, on behalf of our client, CH Holdings, we hereby notify you that you have defaulted on your business line of credit. The total principal amount of $4.3 million is now due in full. You are given a period of 3 days to settle the entire debt. Failure to do so will result in our immediate foreclosure on your assets, namely, 1 residential unit located at 12 Oakwood Drive and 1 luxury sports vehicle. The glass Blake was holding slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. Sweat poured down his face. 3 days. $4.3 million. The house foreclosed. No, impossible, he whispered, trembling. I paid the installment last week. What default? And what is CH Holdings? His celebration of victory had suddenly turned into the beginning of a nightmare. That night, amidst the music and laughter with his friends and Amber, Blake could only manage a fake smile. His mind was in turmoil. He felt an invisible trap slowly closing around his neck. Blake didn't sleep a wink. Beside him, Amber slept soundly, exhausted from their small party. But in Blake's mind, the words from the legal notice spun like a broken record. $4.3 million. 3 days. Foreclosure. CH Holdings. As soon as dawn broke, Blake shot out of bed. His body ached, and his eyes were bloodshot. He didn't shower, just splashed water on his face and threw on some clothes. He no longer cared about his appearance. At 8 a.m. sharp, just as the bank opened, Blake was already driving his car to the main branch where he was a VIP client. He had to clear up this mess. It had to be a clerical error by the bank. It had to be. He stormed inside, bypassing the regular customer line and heading straight for the VIP services desk. I'm Blake Williams. I want to see the branch manager. Now, he said loudly, slapping his VIP card on the counter. The startled employee immediately assisted him. Blake was shown into a private room. 5 minutes later, a well-dressed client relationship manager met with him. It wasn't the branch manager. Good morning, Mr. Williams. How can I help you? Cut the crap, Blake snapped. Explain to me why all my credit cards are blocked, why my salary account is frozen, and why I received this absurd default notice. The manager calmly looked at his computer screen. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, sir. Let me check. Interesting. What's interesting? Blake shouted. The manager looked up. We weren't the ones who blocked your accounts and credit cards, sir. It seems your balance is, in fact, zero, and your credit card limit is completely maxed out. Impossible, Blake yelled. My salary is in the 5 figures, and my limit is in the 6 figures. I didn't use anything yesterday. Correct, sir. But our system registered an emergency automatic debit against your business line of credit last night at 12:01 a.m. This debit has absorbed the entire balance of your salary account and simultaneously maxed out the remaining limits on all your credit cards. Blake turned pale. An emergency debit? By whose order? The manager looked at the screen again. Not by our order, sir. It's an order from the new owner of your line of credit. New owner? According to our records, the $4.3 million business loan you held with our bank was sold 6 months ago to a private equity firm called CH Holdings. We only act as the managing agency for your monthly installment payments. Blake's heart sank. CH Holdings. Why would they do this? I've never missed a payment. The manager shook his head. That's beyond our purview, sir. According to the notification we received from CH Holdings last night, you have been declared in default as per the loan sale agreement. When a default occurs, CH Holdings has the right to forcibly withdraw funds from your accounts as an initial late penalty. And it appears that's exactly what they've done. Blake felt weak, gripping the edge of the desk. How? How could I be in default? We don't know the specifics, sir. It should be explained in the legal notice you received. You'll have to speak directly with CH Holdings or their lawyers, the manager said with a flat tone, as if discussing the weather. Blake staggered out of the bank. The sky seemed to be spinning, and sweat soaked his shirt. He sat in his sports car, the car that would be repossessed in 3 days. His hands were shaking violently. CH Holdings, that name again. He pulled out his phone and searched for CH Holdings online. What came up was a corporate behemoth. Catherine Holdings, a conglomerate operating in luxury fashion, global skincare, and real estate. Its logo was everywhere. Blake had seen it before but had never paid it any attention. Why? Why would a company this huge buy my measly debt? He muttered in desperation. Then he remembered the name of the law firm on the notice, Grant & Sterling Associates. Mustering what courage he had left, he dialed the phone number listed on the document. Good morning, this is Blake Williams. I received a notice on behalf of CH Holdings. This must be a mistake. I've never defaulted. The voice on the other end was calm and cold. There is no mistake, Mr. Williams. Our client is acting within the law. You have violated Clause 11, Section B of the loan agreement you signed. Clause 11, Section B. What's that? If you find it bothersome to read the documents you sign, Mr. Williams, that clause stipulates that you are obligated to maintain familial harmony and not commit immoral or dishonorable acts that could affect the image of the business loan. Blake fell silent. He felt the blood drain from his face. That's an absurd clause. It has nothing to do with the debt. It has everything to do with it, Mr. Williams. When your loan was sold to our client, all clauses, especially that morality clause, were activated. Our client is a company that highly values family principles. Your action of divorcing and evicting your gravely ill wife, Catherine Miller, to live with another woman is a serious violation of Clause 11, Section B. Blake couldn't breathe. How? How did you know? We have irrefutable evidence, Mr. Williams. Photos, audio recordings, and witnesses. We know you threw your wife out 2 nights ago. That is what triggered this default claim. Blake's knees went weak. Catherine. This was all because of Catherine. But how? How did Catherine know CH Holdings? What do they want? Give me time. I'll make the payments. Blake was begging now, trembling with fear. It's too late. Our client is not interested in installments. As per the notice, you have, 2 days and 8 hours left to pay the $4.3 million. If not, our execution team will be there to seize your house and your car. The line went dead. Blake threw his phone against the dashboard. He screamed inside the car. $4.3 million in 2 days. It was impossible. His salary was frozen. His only assets were this house and car, which, it turned out, weren't even his. He tried to think clearly. Catherine. This is Catherine's doing. But how? Did Catherine work at CH Holdings as a janitor and complain to her boss? Impossible. It was illogical. Blake's knees went weak. Catherine. This was all because of Catherine. But how? How did Catherine know CH Holdings? What do they want? Give me time. I'll make the payments. Blake was begging now, trembling with fear. It has everything to do with it, Mr. Williams. When your loan was sold to our client, all clauses, especially that morality clause, were activated. Our client is a company that highly values family principles. Your action of divorcing and evicting your gravely ill wife, Catherine Miller, to live with another woman is a serious violation of Clause 11, Section B. He tried to find out who owned CH Holdings. He opened a business news portal. The owner of CH Holdings was a mysterious figure. The company was run by a CEO named Director Diane Hayes. Diane. Blake frowned. The name sounded familiar. Suddenly, he remembered. Years ago, Catherine had mentioned an Aunt Diane, a friend from her community group who was an amazing person. Blake had always mocked her. Just a bunch of neighborhood ladies, he'd said. As he was pulling out of the bank's parking lot, his phone rang. It was Amber. Blake ignored it. Amber kept calling. Annoyed, Blake answered. What? Honey, where are you? Why are you yelling? Come quick. The credit card you gave me this morning was also declined at the salon. I'm so embarrassed. Do you even have any money? Blake slammed the steering wheel. More problems. I have an emergency. You pay for it with your money first. What? My money? No way. Transfer me money now. I told you I have an emergency. Blake hung up abruptly. At the salon, Amber stared at her phone, stunned. It was the first time Blake had ever yelled at her. She began to feel that something was wrong. The rich man she boasted about was suddenly having trouble with all his cards. Suspicion began to grow in her mind. Blake no longer cared about Amber. He floored the accelerator of his sports car. He had to find Catherine. He would get on his knees and beg if he had to. He didn't know that the Catherine he was looking for was recovering from her illness, sitting in her office chair on the top floor of the CH Holdings building, monitoring his every panicked move through reports from her legal team. There was no escape for Blake. The second day was hell. His trip to Catherine's parents' house ended in failure. Their house was small and modest, just as he expected, but her parents looked at him with a mixture of hatred and pity. Catherine wasn't there. They didn't know where their daughter was. You threw my daughter out when she was sick, didn't you? Catherine's father asked, his voice shaking with restrained rage. And now you come looking for her? Get out of here. Don't you ever set foot in this house again. Blake returned to the city empty-handed. What little money he had left in his emergency account was spent on gas for the round trip. That night, he and Amber had a huge fight. Amber demanded to know what was happening. At his wits' end, Blake finally confessed. He said he had a clerical problem and his accounts were temporarily frozen. Amber wasn't a fool. She saw the legal notice on the table. 3 days, $4.3 million. Foreclosure. You're ruined, Blake. Amber screamed hysterically. It's temporary. I'll fix it. This is all Catherine's fault, Blake yelled in frustration. I don't care whose fault it is. I'm not living with a poor man. That night, they slept in the cold, luxurious bed with their backs to each other. Blake couldn't sleep. The countdown in his head kept ticking. Tomorrow was the third day. The morning of the third day was the most terrifying of Blake's life. The sun rose, but it felt like the end of the world. At 9 a.m., as he and Amber were having a tense, silent breakfast, the doorbell rang. Blake and Amber looked at each other, their faces pale. Blake shook his head. Don't open it. Pretend we're not here. The doorbell rang again, more insistently this time, accompanied by loud knocking. Mr. Blake Williams, we know you're in there. We are the execution team from the law firm of Grant and Sterling Associates. Blake's heart stopped. Amber started to cry in fear. What are we going to do, Blake? What are we going to do? She sobbed. Terrified, Blake ran towards the back door. He thought about escaping through the yard, but when he opened the kitchen door, 2 burly security guards were already standing there. Please remain inside, sir, they said firmly. Blake was surrounded. He went back to the living room. When the legal team managed to open the door with the help of a locksmith they had brought, a man in an impeccable suit walked in, holding a folder. Behind him, several court officers carried sized stickers. Mr. Williams, your time is up. Exactly 3 days. the lawyer said in a cold voice. "By court order, we will now begin the foreclosure proceedings on this house and all assets within to settle the outstanding debt to our client, CH Holdings." "No, please, give me time." Blake fell to his knees. His arrogance vanished in an instant. "I'll pay, I promise. Just give me one more week." The lawyer shook his head. "You were given more than enough time. Our team will begin their work now. You may only take the personal items you are wearing. You have 15 minutes to voluntarily vacate this property." Blake was surrounded. He went back to the living room. When the legal team managed to open the door with the help of a locksmith they had brought, a man in an impeccable suit walked in, holding a folder. Behind him, several court officers carried sized stickers. A bewildered Blake shouted, "Amber, where are you going? Help me!" The court officers began to enter. They paid no mind to the drama. They started slapping sized by holding stickers on the flat-screen TV, the luxury sofa, the expensive paintings. Outside, the sound of a tow truck could be heard, coming to take Blake's sports car. 5 minutes later, Amber came down. She wasn't crying anymore. She was dragging 2 large suitcases that she had apparently packed in advance. She ignored Blake, who was staring at her in stunned silence, and walked straight to the front door. "Amber, you're leaving me?" Blake cried out, his voice breaking. Amber stopped and turned. Her face was full of hatred. "Leaving you? Of course. I'm not going to live with a broke loser like you. I thought you were a king, but you were just a clown. Enjoy your ruin alone, Blake. I've called a cab. Goodbye." Amber walked out, dragging her suitcases past the execution officers without a second glance. Blake was frozen, betrayed, and abandoned, exactly as he had done to Catherine 3 days ago. The difference was, Catherine was thrown out when she was sick. Amber abandoned him at the peak of his ruin. "Time's up, Mr. Williams," a security guard said, grabbing Blake's arm. Blake was dragged out of his own house. He was thrown onto the hot sidewalk, still in his pajamas. He watched his prized sports car being towed from the garage. He saw the door to his house being chained and sealed. Everything was gone. In 3 days. Blake collapsed helplessly on the sidewalk. Passers-by stared at him strangely. The man who had been so arrogant was now a spectacle. He was alone, broke, homeless, with no one. In his extreme panic, in his unspeakable humiliation, his brain could only think of one name, the source of it all. Catherine. He checked his pockets. His old phone was still there. He didn't know who to call anymore. He wanted to curse Catherine. He needed to beg Catherine. He didn't know. He just needed to let it out. With trembling hands, he searched for Catherine, my wife, in his contacts. He pressed the call button. He didn't expect her to answer. Maybe the number had changed or the phone was off. But it rang once, twice, and on the 3rd ring it connected. "Hello?" The voice was Catherine's, but it wasn't a weak, sickly voice. It was the calm, clear, cold voice of a woman. Blake, who was about to get angry, suddenly felt very small. He wept. His crying just burst out. It was the cry of a loser. "Catherine," he cried hysterically. "Catherine, help me, please. Catherine, I don't know what happened. They took our house, they took the car, they threw me out. I'm on the street, Catherine. Why did this happen?" On the 40th floor of the CH Holdings building, inside a VVIP treatment suite, now converted into a luxurious temporary office, Catherine sat calmly. She was no longer bedridden. She was healthy, vibrant, and incredibly dignified. An emerald satin headscarf framed her determined face. In front of her, Director Hayes and several department heads were in a meeting. The old phone that Catherine had asked Director Hayes to retrieve from the house vibrated on the table. The name Blake flashed on the screen. The meeting paused. All eyes turned to Catherine. Catherine raised a hand, asking everyone to be quiet. She looked at Director Hayes and smiled faintly. She pressed the speakerphone button so everyone in the room could hear. Blake's hysterical crying immediately filled the room. "Help me, please. Catherine, I don't know what happened. They took our house, they took the car, they threw me out. I'm on the street, Catherine. Why did this happen?" Catherine waited for Blake to finish his sobbing. She gestured for the others to remain silent. The quiet of the room was a stark contrast to Blake's panicked voice on the phone. After Blake's sobs subsided, Catherine leaned her lips toward the microphone. She replied in a calm, strong voice, a voice Blake had never heard before. "I'm sorry. Who is this?" There was silence on the other end. Blake's sobbing stopped abruptly. "What? What?" "It's me, Catherine. Blake, your husband." "Oh, Mr. Williams," Catherine said in an indifferent tone, as if speaking to a stranger. "I believe there's a misunderstanding. First, you are no longer my husband. My divorce papers were filed this morning. Second, our house? 3 days ago? You made it very clear that it was your house, didn't you?" Blake gasped. His throat was dry. This was Catherine's voice, but not his Catherine, not the weak woman he could trample on. This voice was filled with authority. "Catherine, where are you?" he whispered, terrified. "What have you done? Your voice? You're healthy?" "I'm in the middle of a very important meeting right now," Catherine replied. She leaned back in her chair, looking at the city skyline through the massive glass window behind her. "We're discussing our business expansion into the Middle East. Something you wouldn't understand. Business. You know, business." Blake was confused. "Catherine, don't talk nonsense. Help me," he pleaded again. "I know this is your doing. It must be your community group friend, Director Diane, right? You complained to her. Please, Catherine, tell her to stop all this. I'll do anything. I'll get back with you. I'll divorce Amber. I promise." A cold, cynical laugh came through the speakerphone. It was Catherine's laugh. "Get back with you? Do you think I'd pick up the trash I've thrown out? And Amber? You're too late, Blake. She left you an hour ago, right when the execution team arrived. My legal team just informed me." Blake felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over his head. Catherine knew. She knew everything. She was watching everything. "Who are you?" Blake whispered in pure terror. The hair on the back of his neck was standing up now. "Who the hell are you, Catherine?" Catherine smiled. "Do you really want to know, Blake? For all the years you lived with me, you insulted me, calling me a sick, poor woman who just played on her phone. You never once asked me what I was actually doing on my phone." "What do you mean?" Catherine signaled to Director Hayes. Director Hayes took over. "Hello, Mr. Williams. You are speaking with the executive board of Catherine Holdings." Blake recognized the calm voice from the lawyer's call. "Die, Director? Why do you have Catherine's phone? What is your relationship with my wife?" Catherine took the phone back. "She's not my friend, Blake. She is my right hand, the CEO who runs the company for me." Silence. Blake struggled to process the information. "You asked who I am," Catherine continued. She walked to the window, looking down at the street below, where Blake might be sitting like a beggar. "You called the number of your poor wife you abandoned, but let me introduce myself officially." Catherine's voice now resonated with full authority. "Hello, Blake. You are speaking to Catherine Miller, the sole owner, founder, and chairwoman of Catherine Holdings, the company with a monthly net profit of $1.6 million that just repossessed all of its assets from you." The phone slipped from Blake's hand, clattering onto the sidewalk. Blake himself was frozen, his eyes wide with terror, staring at the hot pavement. He forgot to breathe. His world hadn't just shattered, it had ceased to exist. Blake crumpled onto the dirty sidewalk, petrified. His phone lay beside him, screen cracked, but the call was still connected. He could hear Catherine's calm breathing on the other end, a stark contrast to the frantic pounding of his own heart. "No, impossible," Blake whispered, his voice cracking in denial. "This has to be a nightmare. Catherine, you're lying, right? This is all a lie." Catherine's voice came back, cold and emotionless. "I don't have time for lies, Blake. I'm busy, but since today is the day of your ruin, I'll grant you a little of my time." There was a pause. Blake was still in a daze, staring at the pavement. "Lift your head, Blake," Catherine commanded. "Look across the street, a little to your left." Slowly, like a broken robot, Blake raised his head. His swollen eyes squinted against the midday Sunday. Across the busy avenue, a blue-glass skyscraper towered arrogantly. At its peak, 3 giant letters gleamed in the sun. CH. That building, Blake whispered, his throat raw. Yes, Catherine Holdings, Catherine replied. I'm on the 40th floor. I can see you clearly from my window. You look so pathetic, sitting there on the sidewalk. The security guards in this area will be shooing you away soon. Blake crumpled onto the dirty sidewalk, petrified. His phone lay beside him, screen cracked, but the call was still connected. He could hear Catherine's calm breathing on the other end, a stark contrast to the frantic pounding of his own heart. No, impossible, Blake whispered, his voice cracking in denial. This has to be a nightmare. Catherine, you're lying, right? This is all a lie. Come to the lobby, Catherine continued. I want to see you. I want to see with my own eyes the face of an arrogant man as it crumbles. The call ended. Blake sat stunned for a full minute, his body paralyzed. He had nothing left. The house was gone, the car was gone, Amber was gone, and now even his pride was about to be shredded. He had no choice. Where else could he go? A morbid curiosity, mixed with a foolish hope that he could still beg, forced him to his feet. With faltering steps, he stood up. The pajamas he wore were now filthy with street dust. He walked like a zombie towards the massive glass doors of the CH building, oblivious to the blaring car horns. The building's lobby was another world. Polished imported marble floors, an artificial waterfall on one wall, dozens of impeccably dressed employees bustling about. The cold blast of air conditioning hit his sweaty body, making him shiver. Blake stood in the middle of all this opulence, lost. He was a stain on a white canvas. A beautiful receptionist, Jessica, looked at him with a mix of disgust and suspicion. "Excuse me, sir. Can I help you?" Her voice was clearly hostile. "Come to the lobby," Catherine continued. "I want to see you. I want to see with my own eyes the face of an arrogant man as it crumbles." The call ended. Jessica's eyebrow arched. "Mrs. Miller? You mean our chairwoman? Do you have an appointment?" "No, but she asked me to come." "Tell her it's Blake." "I'm sorry, sir, you can't enter without an appointment." Jessica already had her hand on the phone, clearly about to call security. "Let him pass." A firm voice interrupted her. Blake turned. Director Diane Hayes stood there, flanked by two burly security guards. Director Hayes's face was calm, but her eyes looked at Blake with disdain. "So, you're Blake." Blake recognized the woman, Catherine's community group friend, Director Diane. "Allow me to correct you," Director Hayes said coldly. "I'm not her community group friend. I'm her CEO. Now, follow me. Chairwoman Miller is expecting you." Blake was led through the lobby without resistance. All eyes were on him now. A disheveled man in dirty pajamas, flanked by the CEO and security guards. Murmurs started to spread. Blake wanted to cover his face, but he had no pride left. They didn't take him to the main elevator. Director Hayes stopped him in the VVIP waiting area in the center of the lobby. "Wait here. The chairwoman will be down." Blake stood rigidly, his heart pounding so hard it hurt. He felt like a defendant awaiting his death sentence. Every second felt like an hour. Suddenly, a soft ding came from the private elevator at the far end of the lobby. Immediately, all activity in the lobby ceased. The busy employees, the receptionist, even the guards at the main door, they all stopped, stood a little straighter, and turned towards the elevator. Some gave a slight bow. The VVIP elevator doors slid open. Two personal bodyguards in black suits stepped out first, flanking the door. And then, Catherine emerged. Blake gasped. He could have died on the spot. This woman was Catherine, but not the Catherine he knew. The woman walking towards him was a queen. She wore a premium sapphire blue power suit that fit her body perfectly. A matching silk scarf framed her sharp face in a stylish, modern way. Her face, which used to look pale, was now fresh, adorned with subtle but high-end makeup that accentuated her sharp eyes. She walked with confidence, her high heels clicking softly but firmly on the marble floor. An aura of power and wealth emanated from her every move. The employees she passed greeted her with respect. "Good afternoon, Chairwoman." Blake trembled. "Chairwoman." Director Hayes immediately approached Catherine and gave a slight bow. "Chairwoman, he's waiting." Catherine nodded, her gaze never leaving Blake. She walked slowly, each step seemingly trampling on the remnants of Blake's pride. She stopped exactly 5 feet from the now shaking man. Catherine looked Blake up and down, from his messy hair to his pajamas and the hotel slippers he was wearing. Her gaze was cold, analytical, and merciless. "Catherine," Blake could barely manage a whisper. "Yes, Blake, it's me," Catherine said, her voice calm and clear, echoing in the silent lobby. "The sick, pathetic woman you abandoned 3 days ago." Blake couldn't take it anymore. All his strength gave way, his knees buckled. He uncontrollably collapsed onto the cold marble floor. He knelt at Catherine's feet and wept, sobbing his heart out. "Catherine, I'm sorry. Please, Catherine, I was wrong. I was blind. I have sinned against you." Blake tried to grab the hem of Catherine's suit jacket, but his hands were shaking too much. Everyone in the lobby was stunned. The scene was too shocking. A man crying hysterically at the feet of their chairwoman. Catherine's 2 bodyguards stepped forward to pull Blake away, but Catherine raised a hand, silently signaling them to stop. She wanted Blake to feel this humiliation completely. "Forgive me, Catherine. Give me back our house. Please, I'll divorce Amber. I'll be your husband again. Catherine looked at him without expression. No pity, no anger, just an icy emptiness. She leaned down slightly, not to help Blake up, but to whisper. "Get up," she commanded, her voice low but full of authority. Blake, with what strength he had left, scrambled to his feet, trembling. His face was a mess of tears and sweat. Catherine looked him straight in the eye. "You want to beg?" she asked, her voice now loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Too bad, Blake. My company doesn't hire beggars." After saying that, Catherine took a silk handkerchief from her purse. Blake had a fleeting moment of hope that she would wipe his tears. Instead, Catherine used the handkerchief to brush an imaginary speck of dust from her suit sleeve, as if she had just touched something filthy. After that single dismissive gesture, she turned elegantly and walked back to the VVIP elevator. "Director Hayes, take care of him," she said without looking back. "Give him one final lesson." "Understood, Chairwoman." The elevator doors closed. Catherine was gone from his sight. Blake stood frozen, shattered. The public humiliation he had just received from the woman he considered trash was 1,000 times more painful than losing his house and car. Director Hayes approached him. "Come, Mr. Williams, let's finish this. There's something Chairwoman Miller wants you to see." "What else? What else are you going to take from me?" Blake cried in despair. "Not take," Director Hayes said. "Make you understand just how foolish you've been all this time." Blake was dragged away by 2 guards, this time to a lavish conference room on the mezzanine floor. He was thrown into a chair inside the cold meeting room. The room's large glass window overlooked the lobby, allowing him to see and be seen. Across from him, Director Hayes sat calmly, accompanied by 2 men in impeccable suits whom Blake knew were lawyers. He could only hang his head and stare at the floor. He had lost. He had nothing left. "Mr. Williams," Director Hayes began, her voice calm like a teacher about to lecture a foolish student. "You're still confused as to how the wife you deemed useless, poor, and sickly could be the owner of all this." Blake said nothing. He had no strength to reply. Director Hayes pressed a button on the table. A large projector screen descended from the ceiling, and the room lights dimmed slightly. The screen lit up, showing a large title, Catherine Holdings, Chaich, Business and Financial Report. "All right, let's begin the lesson, Mr. Williams." "Let's go back 5 years, Director Hayes said. Graphs, income statements, balance sheets, figures in the billions that made Blake's eyes ache began to appear. 5 years ago, you were just fired from your first job. You were depressed, angry, blaming the world. While you were busy job hunting and lamenting your fate, your wife, whom you thought was just a housewife, started working in the kitchen. Blake lifted his head slightly. "Not cooking for you," Director Hayes continued, as if reading his mind. "She was formulating skincare products from her family's herbal recipes. When you mocked her for being on her phone late at night, she was actually responding to hundreds of orders from her first customers. When you finally got a new job and started becoming arrogant, she was secretly renting an office for a small production space." The screen changed. Photos appeared a cramped office, a larger warehouse, then a vast modern factory, and pictures of CH branches in New York, Paris, Shanghai, and Tokyo. CH Holdings, Mr. Williams. It stands for Catherine Holdings. Catherine, as in your wife's name. This company, this building, everything you see is hers, 100%. Blake trembled violently. But how? The funds? The money? Ah, the money. Director Hayes smiled cynically. You always underestimated her because she never asked for much, did you? You were proud you could give her a monthly household allowance of a few $1,000s, which you often cut when you were angry. You called her poor. Director Hayes pressed another button. The screen changed. A large number appeared clearly. $1,600,000. $1.6 million. Director Hayes emphasized each word. This is Mrs. Miller's personal monthly net income, which went into an account in her own name that you knew nothing about. An income far greater than your company's CEO's salary, the woman you insulted and threw out for being poor. Blake felt nauseous. The world seemed to spin. $1.6 million a month. And your debt, Director Hayes continued, the $4.3 million loan you used to buy that house and luxury car. You were so arrogant when the bank approved it, weren't you? A year ago, when you nearly went bankrupt from mismanaging your side businesses, your loan went into default. The bank was about to seize your assets. But Mrs. Miller found out. Through me, CH Holdings bought your entire debt from the bank. We paid it off. Blake's eyes widened. So that house and that car have been the property of CH Holdings for the past year, Mr. Williams, Mrs. Miller saved you, allowed you to keep living there, allowed you to keep bragging about your so-called success. She was still trying to respect you as her husband. She was hoping you would change. Blake's tears started flowing again. Not tears of remorse, but tears for his infinite stupidity. He had thrown out his savior. She knew I was cheating, Blake whispered, horrified. Of course, she knew, Director Hayes said. She knew everything. One of the lawyers spoke now. And now, Mr. Williams, let's review the evidence. The screen changed again. This time, it wasn't financial charts, it was video footage. Blake saw his own living room. He saw himself tenderly embracing Amber on the sofa. The date stamp in the corner showed it was 6 months ago when Catherine had to go to a community group meeting. The video switched to their bedroom. Blake saw Amber trying on Catherine's clothes and scarves, laughing and tossing them on the floor. And Blake was there laughing with her. And the final, most damning video. 3 days ago, in the same bedroom, Blake saw himself standing arrogantly in front of the bed. He saw Catherine lying weakly. He heard his own hate-filled voice echoing in that meeting room. Listen, you sick, pathetic woman. The divorce papers are filed. Get out of this house by morning. Stop, Blake yelled, covering his face with his hands. Stop it, please, stop it. The screen went black. The room was silent again. Hidden cameras, the lawyer said calmly. Installed a year ago by Mrs. Miller when she first began to suspect you had another woman. Blake was broken. The evidence was irrefutable. He couldn't deny it. Catherine, is she going to put me in jail? Blake asked desperately. Initially, that was the plan, Director Hayes said. We had prepared charges for verbal abuse, abandonment, and adultery. Enough to have you rot in jail for a few years. Blake trembled with fear. But, Director Hayes continued, Mrs. Miller changed her mind. Jail is too comfortable for you. She wants you to feel something worse than prison, a life of humiliation. Director Hayes placed a thin folder in front of Blake. This is Mrs. Miller's official divorce petition. It also includes a claim for moral damages. Blake opened it with shaking hands. Mrs. Miller isn't asking for a division of assets. She doesn't want your dirty money. She has only taken back the house and car that are rightfully hers. But you still have to pay for your actions. Blake's eyes widened in terror at the figure in the claim. $430,000. $430,000, he screamed. I don't have any money. You've taken everything. Of course you don't, Director Hayes smirked. But you still have your job, don't you? Oh, I almost forgot. Director Hayes's smile widened. Breaking news, Mr. Williams. An hour ago, CH Holdings just completed the acquisition of a 70% stake in the company you work for. And as the new majority shareholder, Chairwoman Miller's first order of business is a management reorganization. Your termination letter has been signed. You are officially fired. This was the final nail in Blake's coffin. He had lost everything: house, car, wife, savings, and now his job, the source of his pride. "You're devils," Blake cried, his voice broken. "We're just serving justice," Director Hayes said. "And about that $430,000 debt, Mrs. Miller is very kind. She knows you can never pay it, so she's giving you an option." Director Hayes slid another sheet of paper in front of Blake. "Sign this statement. Admit to all your actions, your adultery, your verbal abuse, your abandonment. If you admit you were wrong, the debt will be waived." Blake looked at the confession. It was the last shred of pride he had left. "Why do you need this?" "Just a guarantee," the lawyer said, "so you don't go around spinning false stories." Blake had no choice. Fired, bankrupt, and homeless. With a trembling hand, he picked up the offered pen. He signed the document confessing his sins. "We're done," Director Hayes said, quickly collecting the papers. Just then, the meeting room door opened. Catherine entered again. She stood before Blake, who was now slumped over, his head bowed. "You divorced me, Blake?" Catherine asked softly. "You threw those divorce papers in my face when I was sick." Catherine took out the same envelope Blake had thrown on her bed. Director Hayes had kept it. In front of Blake's eyes, Catherine slowly tore up the divorce petition Blake had filed. The shredded pieces of paper fell onto Blake's lap. "I am the one divorcing you," Catherine said coldly, "and I'm making sure you don't get a single cent." She looked at Blake one last time. "Now, get out of my building." The two security guards who had been with Director Hayes entered immediately. "Take out this trash," Director Hayes ordered. Blake didn't resist. He was numb. He was dragged out, his arms held firmly. He was pulled through the crowded lobby. The employees stared at him with a mix of pity and disgust. The automatic glass doors opened, and Blake was thrown onto the hot sidewalk again. He landed with a thud, penniless, jobless, homeless, wearing only dirty pajamas. And ironically, a confession of his sins that freed him from a debt. His ruin was now truly complete. For the second time that day, Blake was thrown onto the hot pavement. The glass doors of the CH building slid shut behind him, sealing him off from the luxurious world he had just discovered belonged to Catherine. He coughed, the street dust catching in his throat. His face was streaked with tears, sweat, and now, grime. For a moment, he didn't move. His body was paralyzed. His brain could no longer process the ruin that had unfolded so perfectly and swiftly. Fired, bankrupt, abandoned by his lover, and publicly humiliated by the wife he considered trash, passersby stared at him oddly, a man in dirty pajamas weeping in front of a luxury high-rise. A security guard from the building now stood at the door, watching him with a sharp gaze, making sure he didn't try to re-enter. Blake had to leave. With what little strength he had left, he got up. His knees shook. He started walking aimlessly. Where could he go? He had no home. He checked his empty pockets. His broken phone had been left behind in the lobby. He truly had nothing now but the clothes on his back. His stomach growled. Fired, bankrupt, abandoned by his lover, and publicly humiliated by the wife he considered trash, Blake didn't resist. He was numb. He was dragged out, his arms held firmly. He was pulled through the crowded lobby. The employees stared at him with a mix of pity and disgust. The automatic glass doors opened, and Blake was thrown onto the hot sidewalk again. He landed with a thud, penniless, jobless, homeless, wearing only dirty pajamas. And ironically, a confession of his sins that freed him from a debt. His ruin was now truly complete. Blake told his story, a distorted version. "She set me up, man. My accounts are frozen. Lend me some cash." The friend's shocked face turned cold. "Sorry, Blake. The news just spread on the group chat. You got fired, right? And CH Holdings seized your assets." Blake was stunned. "How do you know?" "Everyone knows. You messed with Catherine Holdings. You're crazy. Sorry, man. I can't help you. I don't want any trouble with CH." He got up and left in a hurry. The other friends pretended not to see him. Blake was left alone in the middle of the cafe. The waiter subtly asked him to leave. He was back on the street, humiliated. He was a pariah. No one dared touch him for fear of Catherine's shadow. Night fell. Blake was starving. He curled up to sleep in a closed storefront, using his arms as a pillow, shivering. This was his instant karma. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, Amber was panicking. She had escaped with 2 suitcases of designer clothes and bags, temporarily renting a cheap motel room. She started contacting other wealthy men on her list. "Hello, Chairman Kim, it's Amber. Are you busy? Let's have dinner," she said in a flirty voice. "Amber? Who's Amber?" the man replied. "Oh, Chairman, it's Amber. We met at the party." "Oh, Amber. Blake's broke girlfriend." "Right." The man's voice changed instantly. "Sorry, I'm busy. Don't call again." The line went dead. She tried another man. The response was the same. The news of Blake's downfall had spread like wildfire, and her name was dragged down with it. She was the mistress of a ruined man. Her reputation was shattered. Unfortunately, her bad luck didn't end there. As she was lamenting her fate, there was a knock on her motel room door. 2 men in suits stood there. "Miss Amber? We're from Grant and Sterling Associates. A court summons." Catherine had sued her. The charges were adultery, defamation, and destruction of private property. Catherine was demanding $1.08 million in damages. Amber screamed hysterically. She didn't have that kind of money. The following days were a nightmare for both of them. Amber ran out of money. She started selling her designer bags for pennies on the dollar to survive. Blake, after 3 days of starving and sleeping on the streets, finally swallowed his pride. He walked to the central market where day laborers worked. His once handsome face was now filthy, covered in a neglected, patchy beard. "Sir, need any help?" he asked the foreman, Frank. Frank looked him up and down. "You look soft. Can you lift sacks of rice?" "I'm strong, sir. I need to eat," Blake pleaded, his voice breaking. "Move those rice sacks from there to the truck. I'll pay you $1.50 a sack," Frank said. So began Blake's new life. The man who once wore impeccable shirts and drove a sports car now sweated under the scorching sun, hauling sacks of rice that weighed 100 pounds. His back was in permanent pain, and his hands were calloused and often bloody. He had long forgotten the smell of clean shirts or expensive cologne. He only knew the smell of sweat, market garbage, and cheap cigarettes. One afternoon, after 12 hours of non-stop work, Blake received his day's wages, $55 in crumpled bills. He dragged his aching legs out of the market. He stopped at his usual food stall, 1 plate of rice with a side, to go. With the food container in hand, he walked to a large intersection. He sat on the dirty sidewalk, leaning against a traffic light pole. He opened the container for his only meal of the day. Across the street, a giant video screen on the wall of a tall building suddenly lit up. It was showing a live broadcast from a business news channel. Blake stopped bringing the food to his mouth. His plastic fork froze mid-air. On that giant screen was Catherine's face. It was a live feed from CH's global launch event that morning. Catherine's clean, calm, and dignified face filled the 100-foot screen. An international journalist asked a question in English, which was subtitled on the screen. "Chairwoman Miller, you are currently one of the wealthiest and most influential women in the world. What is the secret to your success?" Blake held his breath. He saw Catherine smile faintly. "There's no secret," Catherine replied, her voice echoing clearly across the intersection. "I just never stopped working. I never stopped believing in my abilities, even when the person closest to me underestimated me and called me useless." The food container slipped from Blake's hands. The rice and side dish scattered on the dirty sidewalk, but Blake didn't care. His eyes were glued to the screen. Up there, in the sky, the woman he had called sick and pathetic was being interviewed like a global business queen. And down here, on the asphalt, the man who had called himself a king was sitting like a beggar, staring at the remains of his dinner mixed with dust. Blake lowered his head. He didn't cry. He just laughed. A dry, desperate laugh. He had lost. Not just his fortune, not just his position, he had lost everything. The woman he had abandoned now had the world, and he had nothing, not even the pride to pick up the rice he had dropped. Karma had done its job.